So in the last video, we looked at what tables are and how we can use them. And in this video, let's go ahead and create this first customer table inside of MySQL. So you can see I've changed this here from name to first name, and I've changed the number to phone number. That's just because number might be a keyword in MySQL and I don't want to get an error there, so I'm naming it as phone number. And yeah, let's start creating this table in MySQL. So let's open up the workbench and you should see the server down here. Now if you don't see it, just click on this plus button here and then fill in all of your information here. So most of the information should just be filled out by default. The port here is 3306, that's the default port that MySQL uses. At the top here you just type a name for your connection, it can be whatever you want. You can just call it local, for example. And then here under password, you want to click store in vault and then type the password that you created when you installed MySQL. And then you just want to hit test connection here, and if everything works, then you should see the connection right here. So I'm going to double click on this to open it, and I'll just fill in my password here. Okay, now on the left hand side here, you can see a few databases. These are my own databases which I used for projects that I made. You don't need to worry about those right now. Let's create our own database. So here in the part where we write code, I'm going to close this and show you how to open up a new file to type in. You just want to select this first button here with the plus symbol on it. And in here we can write our code. Now, before we start writing any code, in other programming languages, what you might see is you write some code, a few lines, and then you save this file and you run it later. In MySQL, the way we usually work with it is we write a line of code, we run that line of code, and then after we run it, it's already done. We can delete it and start writing our next line of code and run it and so on. Remember, the only thing we're doing here is interacting with storage. So if we say here, for example, save a certain thing in our storage, once we hit run, it's already saved in. We don't need to use that line of code ever again. We can just delete it. And that's basically how you work with the code when you're writing MySQL code. Later on, you may run into things where you need to do a whole list of functions and you might want to save this file somewhere. When you get to that point, there's a save button up here, or you can just hit Ctrl S and save this file somewhere, and then later on you can load it back up to run those commands again. But for right now, we're just gonna write code here, delete it, and then write the next line of code and so on. So the first line of code we're going to write is to create the database. So I'm going to type create database. And now we need to give it a name. So I'm just going to call this myTestDB. And I named mine's all in lowercase letters. MySQL is not really case sensitive when it comes to these keywords like create and database and so on. But it is case sensitive when we're talking about the names we create here, like the name of this database. So I named mine's myTestDB. And I'm just going to hit this lightning button here to run it. And we should see a green check mark down here. Now, unfortunately, I can't make the font any bigger or zoom in here to show you what I'm doing. I just hope this shows in the video. But now I'm going to delete this. And if we refresh here on the left-hand side, we can see we now have myTestDB here. So I'm going to expand this. And we have here tables, views, stored procedures, and functions. And inside of this tables folder here is where we'll store the actual folders we create. The actual tables we create, like this customer table here. So let's go ahead and create this table. Now the first thing we want to do is select myTestDB here, and we want to double click on it. And this will make it turn bold, so that means this is selected. Now when you have a database that's selected, any code you type in here will run against that database. So if I type here create table, it will create the table in that database we have selected here. So make sure you've selected the correct database. And now to create a table, we type create table. So again, to create a database, we type create database. To create a table, we do create table. It's pretty simple, easy syntax to remember. And then we want to give our table a name. So I'm going to call this customers. And I want to open up my brackets here. And I'll just put a semicolon at the end. Now inside of the brackets, I want to expand this. And I'm going to type some values as column names. So whatever we type in here is going to be the column names. And remember, we have 3 columns in our table. One is ID, one is first name, and the last one is phone number. So let's type that in. ID, we put a comma here. First underscore name, we put a comma. And then the last one is phone number. Okay, so after this, we need to declare what type each of these are. So what type of value is stored inside of them. So if we head back to the spreadsheet here, we can see that the ID column stores numbers. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So that will be type integer. If you've worked with another programming language before, you'll know that integer is another way of saying numbers. It's the variable type. And then for first name here, in other programming languages we'll call this string, but in MySQL we call this varchar. And then for phone numbers here, you might think it's an integer as well, but remember, a phone number can start with a 0, but an integer can't start with a 0. So we'll use string here as well so that we can capture that correctly. And let's fill this out. So for ID here, we want int. For first name, we want varchar. And here we need to use brackets, and we need to say 50 inside of it. So what does this mean? Varchar is MySQL's way of storing strings, but we need to specify what's the maximum amount of characters that the string is going to hold. So it needs to reserve that space before we put something into it. And here I'm saying 50 because we shouldn't have a first name that's longer than 50 characters. So for phone number, I'm going to do that as well, varchar, and I'll set it to 15 here. So most phone numbers will just be length 10, but I'm setting it to 15 for safety, just in case we have an edge case where for some reason the phone number is more than 10 digits long. And now there's one more thing we want to add. So if you remember in the last video, we said ID is a primary key and it has to be unique. So to set it as a primary key in our database here, we need to give it the value of primary key. And the word primary and key here just has a space between it. There's no underscore or anything. And then there's one more value we want to give it here, which is auto underscore increment. And a preview just popped up here. I can press tab to auto-complete that. And what this will do is basically we don't need to fill in the ID ourselves. So when we're putting values into this table, the ID will basically take care of itself. So I'm just going to select all of this and click the lightning button here. And we should see a check mark here to say that it ran. And now I'm just going to delete all of this. So let's refresh this again. And now under tables, we see a drop down and we see a customers table here. So to view what's inside of it, we want to use the keyword select. And now we want to say what we're selecting. For right now, I don't want to overcomplicate this. So let's just use a star here. Star means everything. And then from where do we want to select it? So we want to say from, and then the name of the table. The table we just created is called customers here. And remember again, you need to have that database selected here. If you don't have that database selected, it's going to look for that customers table in some other database here where it doesn't exist. So you want to make sure it's selected, and here you want to type customers. And we want to put our semicolon at the end and hit run here. And now you can see that we have our columns here, ID, first name, and phone number. And we just have null for values here because we haven't entered anything in. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to insert data into this table that we just created. For this video, I think we've already done enough. I don't want to overwhelm you with all of this code. And yeah, in the next video, we'll begin adding data into this. So I'll see you in the next video.